All right, so before I get everything locked into where it's going to actually live, I want to make sure that everything I've done so far actually works. So I've got the temporary ignition and the starter switch hooked up. We're going to key it on and see if she fires. I mean, if the internet's to be believed, it's a Subaru, so it might just explode, but let's find out. All right, she'll switch on. I hear gas. Circulating, it's promising. Not in gear. Ooh. So this isn't the time or place, but one of the firmware updates to happen to the Haltech while this has been being worked on is they released the rotational idle update for the Elites. So I can't help myself. Let's do that. Okay, let's keep working on the wiring. Well, it's taken longer than I care to admit, but it is like 95% done. The only thing left to do at this point is I want to run a CAN pad for the ECU triggers like rotational idle, anti-lag, that kind of thing. And then I have to run a switch panel for all my vehicle controls like lights, blower, motor, that kind of thing. So the driver side of things isn't done, but the engine side, most of the ECU stuff is. So here's where we're at. As you can see, we've got everything sleeved. We've got our power ground. That's coming around to the front. I'll show you where that goes. All of our main harness is now sleeved. I did cheat. This is split loom, but it's braided split loom, so looks great. Can't really tell. This harness is now merged for both the wideband controller and the boost control solenoid. Those are now merged into their own little braided harness going in. Everything's tucked in there. The oxygen sensor I did shorten, so that's not like 3 feet long now. Everything under here is now braided, protected. Everything that could be heat shrinked is heat shrinked, and everything else was taped. Kind of hard to tell, but there's the fuel injectors, and the ignition's done too. All right, so coming around to the front, we got our boots on both the Deutsch connectors. They're good to go. Again, everything is sleeved. Everything is heat shrunk as much as possible. We have our alternator sub harness built in. I do have an upcoming episode where I'm going to show how I made this little block for the trigger. It's set up different on my car because I'm running a battery kill switch than what I did on Mike's car. More to come on that. We have our main ground, again going off the star point grounding method of using the engine block as your main ground to diffuse any potential ground outs for the ECU and frying it. We got our alternator charge cable and signal lines all coming through here. So we've got our 2 main Deutsch connectors coming off the engine. We got our sensors and everything over here. We got our outputs and triggers over here, injection, ignition, that kind of thing. Both of those feed into this main harness here. So we have our power and ground coming off the starter and the engine case coming up here. Here's the ground cable going to the battery. The starter goes to the power distribution block, which has an arm coming off of it going to the battery positive. Coming off the battery positive, we have our alternator lead, and then coming off of this, we have our main feed and return coming off the battery kill switch. And again, there's also the trigger wire in here for the alternator, since we are running the battery kill switch. That way when we kill the battery, it also kills the alternator, so that way the alternator doesn't keep the engine running when we need to do an emergency shut off. We've got our ECU mounted on isolators now. Nice and vibration proof there. Added a CAN bus so we can run a CAN pad, as well as still going back and forth on the dash setup, but if we want to run a Haltech IC7, that's how you would connect that. Fuse box, nothing really changed there, but everything's just cleaned up, kind of tucked away neatly. Everything's nice and braided. And then coming forward, thinking of running all of our switches off the main bar up here just so I can't accidentally hit anything while I'm driving. Since we're here, might as well address this. All of this is going to go. I'll kind of talk about that later, but in a future episode. But for now, everything's just hanging out. And here's the send and feed from the battery kill switch. So we still have our main trigger here as well. Again, everything's still temporary for now until we get that finalized. That's why these wires are just hanging out. But the rest of the harness is sleeved up to this point. At that point, we'll turn it all in. Everything that is in its final position is braided, sleeved, kind of zip tied where it's going to live. So I currently have the throttle pedal out of the car, but there's the connector for it right there. But it and the clutch and brake pedal switch, all that stuff is coming through here. And then we have our fuel pump, sending unit, feeds, and all that stuff coming forward into the Deutsch connector, which I'll show you in a second. So we got our cooling fan installed, which goes into this Deutsch connector. And then from here, these wires feed into this little harness that I made. It feeds both the surge tank fuel pump as well as the main fuel pump. And then all those wires come back here and merge into this Deutsch connector, which then these two power feeds go back to the fuse block. I'm still working on fuel line routing as it's a little busy, but I'm not entirely sure of a way around it right now. I don't know if I've shown this yet. I did add these two little clips here, which hold up this plate, and this plate is then secured via screws back here, and this mounts the pump and the filter. That way you can remove the whole unit as an assembly. Our breather line back here, I still gotta figure out that. So there we go. Still got a lot of work to do and a long way to go, but at least that's done. I need a break from wiring, so next I think I'm gonna work on the body, but that's for next time. Thanks for hanging out. I will see you next time.